Hi, I'm Alex,
And I'm Mateus.
and we are the founders of WorkWell English. WorkWell English is a self study course for professional English. You can find it at workwellenglish.com. WorkWell English is full of videos, one of which we're going to take a look at today, that explain complex grammatical structures in simple, easy to understand terms, real workplace content, so you can see how all of this is used in a real way, and a lot of interactive quizzes, so you can also practice using it in real workplace contexts. Today is our deep dive of an English grammatical subject, the fifth one. Mateos, would you like to set up this video?
Absolutely. So today we're going to talk about the third conditional, which is a direct follow-up to our previous video, which was about the first and second conditionals. But really, this video really ties in all the videos, all the content that we've been talking about since the first one. So present perfect, past perfect, and the first and second conditionals are really all tied together into the third conditional. And the third conditional gets a special treatment, right? The first and second conditionals got one video, but the third conditional gets its own video because it is probably one of the most complex grammatical structures in the English language. So if you can master the third conditional structure in English, you are a very long way towards a professional proficiency. So that's why we give it a nice its own special video here just to talk about the third conditional, which of course is to talk about conditionals, hypothetical situations in the past, right? So the first conditional is about possible situations in the present or future. The second conditional is for hypothetical situations in the present or future. And the third conditional is for hypothetical situations in the past, right? So we are going to watch the video here in full. And then after the video is over, Alex and I will give an additional comments about the video and as well as about pointers on how to better use the third conditional real world scenarios that it can be used in and what to keep in mind while using or when using the third conditional. So why don't we go ahead and get started here? All right, here we go.
Hi, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to continue our look at conditionals by talking about the third conditional. The third conditional is used to talk about hypothetical past situations and their outcomes. Let's take a second conditional sentence and transform it into a third conditional sentence. For example, if I started writing the report today, I would finish before the deadline. Let's take a look at the first part of the sentence. If I started writing the report today. The second conditional uses the past simple tense to present a hypothetical situation in the present. So how do we present a hypothetical situation in the past? Well, since the past simple is already taken, we need something that goes even more into the past. And fortunately, we already learned about a tense that means before the past perfect. We use the verb started, so let's change it to had started. And let's change today to yesterday. So our if clause is now, if I had started writing the report yesterday. Okay, great. We have the first part of our third conditional sentence. Let's take a look at the second part. In the second conditional, we use the modal would with the present tense form of the verb. Now, because the third conditional is all about the past, our result clause is also in the past. And to do this, we use the modal would with the perfect structure, have and past participle. So would finish becomes would have finished, as in I would have finished before the deadline. Okay, our third conditional sentence is now complete. If I had started writing the report yesterday, I would have finished before the deadline. Of course, this means that the deadline is passed and I didn't finish writing the report. While third conditionals may look complex, they are intuitively simple to understand. Here are some more examples. If the marketing team had recommended a bigger budget for the campaign, we would have approved it. If there had been any sign of market downturn, it would have affected our sales. If the merger had been approved, the shareholders would have gotten a bonus. And just like any other conditional, the order can be switched. For example, I would have helped if my colleague had asked me. And this has been our look at third conditionals. Please be sure to check out the additional information we have on other types of conditionals that weren't covered in the video lessons. In the next lesson, we will expand our knowledge of perfect by taking a look at the modal perfect. I'll see you there.
Okay.
Right. Nice explanation, a short and succinct explanation of third conditional there. So you said this in the introduction, and I want to reiterate this. This is the hardest structure in English, right? And I think breaking it down into those parts, move the past to the past perfect, move the present verb after the would to present perfect, makes it really simple. But the good news is everything is easier from here. Like this is maximum difficulty right here. Would you say?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So we're, five episodes in, and everything's going to get easier from there. That's a good sign, right?
It's a good
But
sign,
yeah, it is.
sure.
It
Yeah,
is a because of the two structures that we have to keep in mind, right? The if
that's right.
clause and the result clause. We got to keep them, you know, matching, so to speak, right?
That's
So,
right.
like in the video, we showed how to take a second conditional sentence and transform it into a third conditional sentence by
Totally.
essentially shifting both sides into the past, right? Past simple becomes past perfect, right? If I did becomes if I had done, right? And the result clause would go, for example, would become the perfect would have gone, right? So,
Yes. And that is one of the most common mistakes that I hear even advanced speakers making. And the problem with this mistake specifically is that if you get it wrong, it means something totally different. So it's not just a mistake that somebody kind of understands generally what you're saying and you can move past. It actually changes the time. So if somebody says, if I went, right? When they're trying to talk about the past, they should say, if I had gone, but they say, if I went. That's a hypothetical now, right? That's second conditional. That means something totally different. And that's
yep,
confusing, right? I would
yeah,
do it or I would have done it, very different things. That's
very
confusing. That's
different.
such a common mistake that leads to real confusion in a professional conversation, often.
Yeah. Another thing about professional conversation is look, we are both English teachers and we try to pronounce our words as clearly as possible so that our students can understand us, right? But when in the real world, right, when dealing with English speaking clients or English speaking colleagues, the conversational side is that well, that will be the case, is that there will be a lot of contractions, right? So we won't hear a lot of people saying, if I had done, but really, what would we hear, Alex?
I'd done.
If I'd done. So the D sound really kind of just in between the I and the past participle, right? Sums up the had, right? If I'd done, right? If I'd gone, right? If I'd been there, right? If I'd been there. And if you say it fast, if I'd been there, that's just how people would say it, right? And the same thing
Sure.
goes for the result clause, right? The would have been, would have gone becomes what?
I would have been, I would have gone, would have.
Would have, right? So I'd, he'd, she'd, right? For the had
Yeah.
contraction, and would have, right? For the result
Yeah.
conditional
So the
contraction.
full
So
sentence sounds something like, if I'd gone, I would have been there, or something like that. And that's
yeah,
hard to catch those sounds and know that there's very specific meanings to those sounds, the I'd and the v. And a really hard one is the contraction if that first clause is if I had, and then the next verb is had. So if I'd
Mm.
had, if I'd had it, I
I'd
would have.
had more time,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I would
If I'd
have
had,
finished.
yeah, such a common mistake. And the key thing to remember here that I think you explained well in the video is that again, this is just using this concept of perfect that we talked about in present perfect, that we talked about in past perfect. And we're just applying this essential building block and plugging it in to different parts of English to make it simple. And that's the really nice thing about English. Just plug in the concept of perfect. At the beginning part, past perfect. And the second part, present perfect. And the students know this from watching these videos from our course before, where they've gone through videos 1 and 2. They understand the concept of perfect. They understand present perfect, past perfect. This is just it applied in a longer sentence.
Just plug it in, right?
Plugging it
And
in,
another thing that
exactly.
we might find is that sometimes we talk about how the conditionals have two parts, right? The result clause or the if clause and the result clause. But sometimes we don't need to say both parts,
Yeah.
right? We can just say one part and kind of imply the other part, right? Can you give me an
Yes.
example?
Sure. Oh man, I would have loved that. Meaning, if I had been there, I would have loved that. But obviously, I
Mm.
wasn't there. John would have enjoyed that, for example. Oh, that would have been great. I'm not giving that full sentence. I'm not giving that first clause on there.
It's
Yeah,
implied, right?
it's
It's saying
implied.
it's obvious enough that you don't need to say it, right?
That's right.
Very good.
Exactly. And this is a long structure for sure. It is really common. It's really common, especially for professional English, I think. What are some reasons or what are some scenarios that are common to use this in professional English?
Yeah, so if you're part of a project, if you're in a team that you're building a project or a product, right? And you go through the initial phases of planning and then the phase of execution, right? At the end, maybe there's a project or product launch, right? And now kind of you've released the project into the world, so to speak, right? And what usually happens after is a review, right? A review at the end to say, okay, what were the mistakes and what were the issues that we have learned from, right? And the third conditional plays in beautifully into that project review or post mortem, if you may, right? So we can say things like, if we had had a bigger budget, right? If we'd had a bigger budget taken into that contraction, right? We would have blah, 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 right? Um, Another time we can just, any type of review situation, right? And as well as sometimes we just need to complain,
Sure.
make a nice little complaint saying, "Oh man, if only we'd had more time, right? If only we'd had more time, we would have done, we would have created so many more features,
And
right?"
I'm realizing another one now that I use this a lot on is to give an excuse. To say, well, if I had known about that,
Mm,
I would have done it a different way. Or if John had told me, I wouldn't have done that, for example. But he didn't tell me and I didn't know. So, I use this a lot saying, sorry, but I didn't know. If things had been different, I would have acted differently.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. Um, So here, again, I can't reiterate this enough. There are fancier parts of English. There are other structures that are very professional. Nothing is more complex than this. It just takes a little bit of practice to get used to, and then everything else gets easier. In our next video, we're going to go over modal perfect, for example. And modal perfect is essentially just one half of the sentence, right? Again, so every
Right.
part of English are just these building blocks applied
Yes.
again and again and again in the same way.
It's the reason we started with perfect because perfect is the foundation, right? The like you said, a building block that we just take and plug it in like a brick, right? In a wall. Just plug it in and build these different, more complex, nuanced sides. And yeah, the because of the multiple parts of third conditional, it definitely is the most complex. And
And
we'll get into more sophisticated forms, but nothing as complex as the third conditional, for sure.
WorkWell English here, we're unique in explaining the grammatical structures this way, with this building block way. It's really helpful for adult learners because it's an analytical way of approaching the grammar, which is possible to do in English, where we're breaking it down into components that make sense. They make sense to adults learning English, going, oh, okay, perfect means before. Great. What to talk about for? I'll use perfect. And then applying that again and again and again. So this is a really wonderful way for even an advanced speaker to understand the fundamentals and get that confidence that they know they're using the structures right and they know why they're correct.
Exactly.
All right. Do you think that about does it for third conditional?
I think so, yeah. And you've already teed up our next video, right? Next episode will be about modal perfect, right? So we're just looking at that would have part, right? Oh, it would have been nice. I would have done this, right? And we're going to see how we can plug in the other modals. So we have would, could, should, right? So we'll get into that in the next
Yeah.
video.
But let me give you a quick
Right?
spoiler. The answer is perfect. Again, as always,
It's in the name.
it's in the name. That's right. All right. Thank you, Mateus.
All right. See you next time.